Hi, everyone. I'm David Aragona. Pleased to be joined today by DRF handicapper and correspondent Marcus Hersh to talk some Pick 5 strategy for Fairgrounds Saturday. It is, of course, Louisiana Derby Day, and we're going to talk about this all-stakes sequence that is culminating in the Louisiana Derby. And speaking of Kentucky Derby prep races, you do want to be aware of this package that we've got going on. If you're somebody who's buying up individual past performances to handicap these Derby preps each weekend leading up to the Kentucky Derby, just get them all as a bundle and save 37% PPs for 10 events, including all of the major Derby prep races from now right up until the first Saturday in May, including the Oaks and Derby cards. As part of this, you also get clocker reports, betting strategies, and more. So check out more information about the Road to the Derby package at shop.drf.com. Well, Marcus, we're chatting a little bit offline. I think we don't have to worry too much about weather for this Fairgrounds card for once, as it seems like the turf races are going to be on, and we're likely to have a fast dirt track on Saturday. So like to get that out of the way to begin with. And looking through this sequence, it's an interesting one. There's definitely some star power, some horses that are going to be pretty short prices in stakes races, but also a few that are pretty difficult to decipher, particularly the two bookends of this sequence, including the Louisiana Derby.
I agree with that assessment. I think that you're spot on with all of that. And yeah, the weather's great. The track has been playing very fast. I think the inside has been good on the main track, all meet just generally, and especially this week. We'll see how that goes through the week. The turf rails are up today and tomorrow. This is Wednesday and Thursday. They come down Friday and Saturday. So the ground should be fresh all along the inside part of the turf course. I actually saw it today. It looks great. So, yep. No, we have no excuses about not being properly prepared this time.
Well, we're going to get into the handicapping and ticket structure conversation in just a second, just to kind of set the scene for those who have not seen these Pick 5 strategies videos before. We're not going to give out a single ticket. We're going to talk about each race, slotting horses into categories, sort of pushing you guys towards playing multiple tickets rather than just getting all the horses on one caveman style ticket. We're going to sort of do a riff on the ABC style that's espoused by Steve Christ and others. So you got your all A's ticket, or your all key horses ticket, as we call them. That's going to be the horses that you like the most, horses that you think are going to offer the best value, maybe horses that you want to make a win wager on, or those that you just think are most likely to win. Your use horses, or your horses that are your B horses in the ABC structure, those are just going to be horses that you don't like quite as much as your key horses, but logical contenders that you want to have as replacements in a couple of races if you don't get your keys home. And then the defend horses, or the C horses in the ABC structure, those are going to be the horses that maybe you don't like so much, but you're afraid of them. Let's say a favorite that you think can win but isn't going to offer great value. You want to have some coverage to it if you're right in all the other races with your key horses. Maybe if you have some key horses that you think are going to be prices that can win, and you don't want to lose to a horse that maybe you're not going to bet individually, but you think you're afraid of in the Pick 5 sequence, or maybe a bigger price that you can't really make a case for upgrading to key status, but you do want to use or have some coverage to on a defend ticket for one extra ticket in your series of multiple tickets that you're going to play. So with that in mind, let's get into our ticket structure conversation with the first leg of this sequence. Race 8, it is the Tom Benson Memorial. This is one of those turf races, a mile and a 16th on the grass for the fillies and mares. And as you can see, a large field signed on, Marcus. And I know you've been reporting on Twitter some of the horses that might be withdrawn from a few of these races. I don't think there are too many in here, so we're likely to have a large field.
Yeah, there's Distorted Euro is cross-entered at Turfway. I believe she's supposed to run at Fairgrounds. And then the horse Amber Cascade, they entered hoping the race would get rained off. She won't run if it stays on turf, which it will, so you can take her out of consideration.
Well, that's good to know. And as you can see from this morning line, it's a wide open race. You can make cases for a lot of horses. This is one of the more difficult ones to handicap as we go through this sequence. And I don't know about you, Marcus, but I was having trouble sort of narrowing this race down to a few horses, or even those that I wanted to make my keys. And looking for value in this race, my eye was drifting towards the number 3, Way to Be Marie, as the most likely winner. She is the 4-1 lukewarm morning line favorite, and I had trouble sort of making a strong case against her as being one of the more likely winners of this race. Where do you stand on Way to Be Marie?
Well, I don't know if this is it may be hard to make a case for anyone rather than making a case for too many. It's a very weak field for the class level. And if you can see, by the way, I arranged my ticket structure. Because I find it so baffling, and I don't feel comfortable really weighting the horses I would consider putting on the ticket. I kind of just see it as flat, like I want them all. And unfortunately, or whatever, fortunately, unfortunately, or neutral, Way to Be Marie was a horse I was definitely siding against at a relatively short price. Given the softness of this field, had she progressed from her 3-year-old season, which was quite good, especially early in the year, I think she would, be a very logical winner. But I haven't seen really any sign of that yet this year. I just think, and she also was a pretty early 3-year-old, so I'm not sure that she's really trained on, or she may not even be as good as she was a year ago. And at the likely price, I dumped her. The other, I think Chad Brown's horse on the rail is going to take money, don't you?
Totally. She's 9-2 on the line, and with
Done
these
with flags.
connections in such a wide open race with Flavien Prat aboard, it feels like she's just going to take a lot of money by default.
I think she might be the favorite. And, I have her on my ticket. I would not, I just don't feel confident in her at all. The issues are that, well, I mean, I was impressed with her 2 wins in France last year. She ran, I thought, pretty well against modest competition. And, the horse that she got beat by in the Cleopatra's, she's okay. She didn't run well in subsequent tougher spots. I think this is like the right spot for the horse, but the issues are, she might want to go farther. The 7.5 race she won was not a very strong field at all. And then her one race on something other than soft or heavy ground was not good at all. That was the Belmont Oaks. It was for her French trainer. She ran off the plane. I'm not going to totally hold that against her, but she really didn't show much. And then one workout video of her, and it's on dirt, and she's a turf horse, so I'm not going to totally hold it against her, but certainly didn't impress me at all. So, I would love to feel a little more strongly about her, because I think if I thought she were the horse that could run better than she did in France, I think that she would win this race easily, but I have no confidence that that's the case.
Yeah, and I can see what you're getting at is that this is just a spread race for you. And I promise everybody, Marcus is not going to go caveman for the rest of this ticket. But in this race, I can see you just had difficulty really eliminating horses aside from Way to Be Marie, because you got some prices in there as well.
And the way, the more I looked, the more, these sort Strikingly Spun didn't have a great trip. I'm just picking things out here. Wild About Hillary. She just beat a really nice horse, Free Like a Girl, at Oaklawn, who came back and ran well against the Rapido Anna. If she runs back to that race on turf, she's going to be a front-running threat. And in her 2 turf races, one of them she lost a rider. The other one, she wasn't on the lead. She's a horse that wants to get in front and gallop. I mean, she might be just as good on turf as she is on dirt. I'll just throw another one out there, Champagne Rose. She completely seemed like a grass horse, a grade 1 winner in Brazil, and she was reined off the first time, and then he sent her to Oaklawn to run on dirt the second time. That was a disaster, but who's to say that she's not going to bounce back to her better grass form too and be a plausible winner?
Well, let's flip on over to my grid for this race. And I don't know if I have stronger opinions than Marcus, but I tried to push myself to at least downgrade a few of these horses to use in defense stats rather than use them all on the same level. I am not as against Way to Be Marie as you seem to be, Marcus. I mean, you mentioned how this didn't come up a particularly strong race. I just don't see anybody in this race that's as good as Nanda Dea, who beat her last time. And if she runs as well as she did, I think that she's a very likely winner of this race, Way to Be Marie. And I also can see a very good trip coming for her, because there's not a ton of speed in this field, aside from, Classic Reformer, who probably doesn't want to go this far, and Wild About Hillary. I think Way to Be Marie is just going to be stalking in the pocket behind them. So I had trouble seeing her not finishing in the top 3, and I did view her as one of the more likely winners. Probably not a great price. I really wanted to be more against the Chad Brown horse, Fun with Flags, and I initially had her lower or even off my ticket, but the more I looked, I kind of kept coming back to that sentiment that you espoused, that this is just not a strong race, and this is a horse that probably does not have to be a superstar for the Brown Barn and will do just fine in here. I don't love her races. I'm very concerned that she's really not that good, and they're only running her here because she's not eligible for allowance races because she's already run 3 races with decent horses overseas. So Chad Brown's hands are kind of tied. If he doesn't think a whole lot of her, he's got to run in a race like this. So I'm kind of against her, but I also will not be shocked and don't want to get totally knocked out of the sequence in a race where I'm not loving anybody.
I'll just add one thing on that. I believe he won the race last year with Delahaye, who is was a 4th to 5th string horse for him. So I'm just saying that I think he knows the kind of horse that he can send to be competitive here. And I mean, he's had enough really good grass horses. I'm pretty sure he's fairly strong at creating hierarchies.
And I'm just going to give a stronger push to the 2 other horses I used in the key category, Wild Bout Hillary being one of them. I mean, you mentioned she's in great form lately. And I know you might look at her form and say, well, she's just clearly a better dirt horse. She's taken her game to a new level recently. And I went back and watched at least the last turf race at Hawthorne. She ran a lot better than the result would suggest. I mean, it was an extremely fast pace where anybody was within like 8 lengths of the lead completely fell apart. And she actually was staying on at the end. She's got turf pedigree on the bottom side. She's a speed in this race that I think has a real chance to take them all the way. And you mentioned Champagne Rose and her good turf races in Brazil. I'll just say, I went back and watched a couple of those turf races over there. I mean, the margins of victory are incorrect that you might see in the racing form. She won those races by 6 lengths and 3.5 lengths the last couple of times. She was a dominant winner of those turf races.
Yeah,
she was. I mean, those were 10 furlong races, and I wonder if this distance is going to be a little sharp for her. And, I question the way that McPeak has been running her on the dirt and not turf, and also the fact that she's drawn out in post 13 here. That's far from ideal. But in this kind of race, if she can wake up back on the surface that she prefers, I think she's a real major player.
At a big price.
Well, I think we covered the Tom Benson. Let's move on to the next race of the sequence that I don't think requires quite as much conversation. That is the New Orleans Classic. And I'll just start by handing it over to you, Marcus, because I know you've done a lot of reporting on which of these horses may or may not run in this race, because you see Sierra Leone show up in the entries, and I think a lot of connections start looking for other options, and some of them did set up backup plans.
Yeah, well, what I know as of now is Kinetic is running in the Essex at Oaklawn. Uno Mas Bourbon will be scratched. Tarantino will be scratched. Bishop's Bay is iffy as of Wednesday. Maycock's Bay was also entered in the Essex. They intend to run at Fairgrounds. And Touch Upon a Star, the best Louisiana bred going, as they're up in the air. I think they're probably going to wait as long as they can to decide. He could run Sunday in the Louisiana bred race. I know they've had this race on their radar. We'll just have to see what happens.
So it sounds like we'll have at most 7 horses running, and maybe as few as 5 if all of those horses that are on the fence are withdrawn from this field. But however many compete, Sierra Leone is way the horse to beat coming into this race for his 4-year-old debut. And we were chatting a little bit before we started recording, Marcus. I mean, this horse got so good at the end of last year. I mean, in retrospect, he didn't get the pace scenarios that he needed in the Jim Dandy and the Travers, and he still ran just fine on those races. And he had been on this upward trajectory all year, just keeps getting better, keeps running well with racing, and his Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, yeah, the pace was really fast, and it's set up for a horse like him, but it's also not like he just clunked along at the end. He made a big mid-race move to get into contention and then put those horses away, beating the best dirt horses in the world. I mean, Forever Young was third in that race, and we're talking about the Saudi Cup that he just ran being one of the best dirt races run anywhere in the globe in the past decade. So Sierra Leone, if he comes back in top form, he's going to be awfully tough to beat. But for this exercise, Marcus, and we can go right into the handicapping and show the grid for this race for you, you have to make a decision about whether or not you trust a horse like Sierra Leone to either single him or send most of your play through him, given the fact that he's coming off a layoff. And, we do see sometimes these horses that have a real edge and ability. The day that they're most vulnerable is sometimes the race where they're getting their campaign started. So we'll see if that's the case for Sierra Leone. How are you looking at using him in this pick 5 sequence?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to get to another race where, to me, there's a stone cold single. And I really would prefer not to have 2 odds-on singles in a sequence if I can avoid it. So of those 2, I see him as more vulnerable, partly because of what you said. But you also said something that could be important too, in that he was, he said he didn't get the right pace in his previous races. And while I totally agree, he ran a much different kind of race in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and he got into the race sooner. He was really started motoring at the half-mile pole, really. And that was like the culmination of his entire season. He didn't lug in like he had in the past, but it also was like at the very end of his entire year, it was like his crowning achievement, and he's just getting started again. So does he go back to like the horse he was before, where maybe he needs a little more pace? The track here, it's been really hard on most days when the surface is fast for horses to come from far off the pace and make a sustained move. Another thing in his favor, though, is, regarding the layoff, he was supposedly going to the Saudi Cup, and so he breezed some for that race in February. So he's been going, pretty steady since very early in the year. And I saw him on the track today. I think he's a fit horse. If it were just like meh horses in the race, besides him, I would just give up, throw up my hands and take it. But I think that there are some interesting horses here. And so I think it's worth exploring the possibility of not just leading on this horse completely.
Yeah, I agree. For me, he's not a single either. He's my only key horse, and he's your only key horse. But I think we want to have some backup options because we've seen it before. Sometimes these horses might, be better as 4-year-olds and still lose their first start of the season, especially a closer like this that is going to need some things to go his way. You mentioned it. He could be pace dependent at times. So we'll see if that's the case here. Talk a little bit about Hall of Fame, who I think you have keyed in on as the biggest threat. His maiden win, I believe it was his second start at Fairgrounds last season, was quite eye-catching, and these big maiden wins sometimes can lead you astray. And it looked like it had with this horse because he didn't run back to it at all. I think his maiden win actually told the tale of his talent and who he is. But, it was too much too soon, if not physically, then mentally. He just wasn't mentally prepared to step up in class and get different kinds of trips. And it didn't work out for him. Now, back from his long layoff, I'd say everything has gone perfectly for him to run the race of his life on this day. He had that 1 mile comeback race at Churchill. I thought it was very solid. His 2-turn race was good. I would have liked to have seen him win with a little more authority last time, but he did for the first time show that he could come from behind another horse and fight it out. And he was leaned on late by the second place horse, whose jockey then claimed foul against the horse he had just fouled. So I think he's a very good horse. I don't think he's at Sierra Leone's level, but he's also at the peak of his form cycle on his home track with speed. So if it's a time when he could beat him, it could be here. So the way I looked at it, just to fill out my thoughts on who I'm using and why, I also threw Maycox Bay in because I think either Hall of Fame or Maycox Bay is going to be sent. And if one of them makes a clear lead and the other one takes back a bit, I think either horse, if the track is playing fast and speedy, there's a chance they could go wire to wire. Finally, in the C, or the third category, that horse San Siro took a huge step forward last time after showing some talent, but also some clunkiness and ploddiness. I thought he ran a completely different kind of race last time against a decent allowance horse. He might have another move forward in him too. And if he gets like a rail run into a fast pace while Sierra Leone is struggling to come around the outside and sustain his momentum, maybe he could post the upset. Yeah, we can flip over to my grid for this race, and I think we took a pretty similar strategy here. I've also got Sierra Leone as the only key horse. Marcus, all your points are well taken with Hall of Fame. I think you can view him as the horse that still has forward to go out of the mine shaft, just given the trajectory of his career. But I do want to point out, when I watched that race, I think Coramino Amoide ran the better race. I mean, you can argue that the rail was a slight advantage on February 15th. Speed was certainly good. I mean, this horse was outside every step of the way. Hall of Fame got an absolutely perfect trip sitting in the pocket. And I thought he was supposed to put away Coramino Amoide easier than he did. And that horse fought him all the way to the wire. I don't want to ignore the form that this Robertino Diodoro trainee is in right now. He has run a little better than I'd have expected in his last several starts in a row. And I don't know if 9 furlongs is his best distance. I think that's maybe stretching it a little bit for Kamoro Bino Amoide, but they're taking the blinkers off for this race. He's probably going to get another good stalking trip outside of horses. I think at a much bigger price than Hall of Fame, I want to have him on that same tier as my main backup, because I think Sierra Leone is a way more likely winner. But I don't want to put all my eggs in that same basket. And I have similar feelings about San Siro, but the race came up just a little bit too tough for me to take a shot with a horse like him.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered that one. So let's move on to the next leg of the sequence, back over to the turf course, the Muniz Memorial Classic, race 10, going the 1.125 distance, and another large field signed on for this one, 12. And I haven't seen any reporting from you, Marcus, about horses coming out of this race. So I think this one likely to hold together. And while it doesn't have the star power of a Sierra Leone, there are some really nice horses in this field, including 2 Chad Brown runners with credentials on the way in, particularly the number 6 Spirit of St. Louis, who's coming off a victory in the Pegasus World Cup turf last time.
Yeah, big field, but to me, I don't have trouble eliminating a lot of these horses. I saw it as a fairly compact group of real contenders that I wanted to focus on as plausible winners. My temptation was to have a lone A with redistricting, even though Spirit of St. Louis is supposedly faster and has the recency bias. I mean, I think redistricting, I'm not sure. We'll see. He has a chance to be a star in the division this year if he could just string some races together and maybe show a little more positional pace, have a little more luck. I think he's the best. I think he's the more talented horse of the 2 Browns. He also has been training for quite some time, preparing for this spot. And, he needs to win a race. He's 2 for 6. He needs to win a stakes race. I am absolutely certain that Brown has this horse sitting on go. And I see him as a more likely winner than Spirit of St. Louis. That said, he hasn't actually done it yet. I'd say he's more promising than accomplished, and he's going to get bad. Spirit of St. Louis, I just had no idea he had that race in him that he put forth last time. I mean, I thought he could run competitively, but that was a bang up effort. It was the race of his life, a much different kind of turf course. I think he's more of a miler at heart, or 1 1/16. And with a long home stretch and I don't know that he's going to run quite as well as he did last time. But that said, maybe he is just a complete late bloomer. He did throw him in the Grade 1 last fall, so Brown has thought this horse was capable for quite some time. So I ended up going AA, and then Cherie DeVoe has 2. Brilliant Birdie is a 3-year-old facing older for the first time. He was fine last year. I don't see him as the kind of horse who's going to come out first time back from winter break and beat horses like this, getting out of age-restricted competition. Rebel Red, I'm pretty sure, is kind of sort of prepping for a longer race at Keeneland. That said, he showed a lot after losing an eye. I guess that was the key to his form turnaround. He lost an eye at Saratoga, but he's been very good. I've been nothing but impressed with a lot of stuff that he's done. Maybe 1 1/8 is the right trip for him. I think he's going to be ready. I think he's going to be a very fair price. And so I tossed him into the B category.
Yeah, and you're going pretty thin in here. I totally hear you on the 2 Brown horses. I kind of went through a very similar thought process with redistricting versus Spirit of St. Louis. I agree. I like redistricting more. Chad Brown has always had high hopes for this horse. You can see it in the way he's campaigned him, going right into stakes company off, a maiden debut win, and then, a prep race off a layoff, right back into Grade 1 company, and it's kind of burned him so far. But I think this horse finally has the foundation under his belt that he's going to be able to win a race like this, and we'll see if he can do it against his stablemate Spirit of St. Louis. We can flip on over to my grid for this race, and you'll see I put redistricting in the key category, and I downgraded Spirit of St. Louis to my use category, or my B horse, because I want to see it again from Spirit of St. Louis, Marcus, because I've been very familiar with this horse through his time as a New York bred, running against state bred company in New York, and I never really thought of him as a Grade 1 horse, a very good horse who was probably better than those he was running against for much of his career, but I wonder how much of that Pegasus World Cup victory was just due to the trip, being produced at the right time at Gulfstream, a turf course that can be tricky to ride at times, and trip really dictates results there quite a bit. So I just want to see him do it again on a very different kind of turf course, the way that you were getting at.
I do the weekly divisional ratings or rankings for daily racing form, and I believe my comment on that horse is exactly that. Big win at Gulfstream. Like to see him do it again.
And then with regard to the two Cherie DeVaux horses, I agree with you about Rebel Red. I wonder if the last race kind of exposed that maybe going longer is going to be a bit preferable for him down the line. And to be honest, I was left a little cold by his Bernard Baruch, where he took a lot of support and was very disappointing. That was his first race following that loss of his eye. So maybe that was the excuse there. It's kind of a built-in excuse for him for this horse moving forward. But if he's a similar price to Brilliant Birdie the 8 is the one that I wanted to upgrade. I know he's coming off the layoff here, but I liked everything this horse did last year. Yeah, he got paced to close into in a few of those races, but with the large field here, I don't think they're going to be walking up front. And I don't mind him stretching out to the 9 furlongs. The way he finishes off his races and the way he moves, I don't think distance is going to be a real issue for this horse. And I know he kind of flew under the radar running mostly in Kentucky last year, not contesting the grade 1 races in this division per se, but I think he showed just as much talent as anybody in that 3-year-old turf division. I'm not going to be surprised when he's able to take a step forward here. So I was wondering which of the Cherie horses was going to be a shorter price. I know that the line has Rebel Red at 4-1 and Brilliant Birdie at 5-1. If that's the way they bet it, I definitely want Brilliant Birdie. But I was viewing these two horses as better prices than both of the Brown duo. So we'll see how the prices shake themselves out on those two. And those are definitely the horses to beat. I did want a little bit of coverage with some defend horses because Gigante does have a race in him that I suppose puts him in the mix here, and he didn't get the right trip last time. Johnny's Fireball, I could see getting a very good trip in this race. Probably not good enough if the two Brown horses show up. What Say Thee, another horse who's got some races on occasion. And, for such a large field, Marcus, I'd rather be blessed as a horse that I think they've got to send this time. And there aren't too many need the lead types in this race. I mean, there are horses with tactical speed, but I'd rather be blessed. They have just kind of been banging their head against the wall rating this horse, and he is resenting it in 2 of the last 3 races. And from an outside post, I think Ben Curtis has to be aggressive this time. I toyed around the idea of upgrading the 11 to one of those first 2 categories and ultimately couldn't quite pull the trigger. But, if I'm playing trifectas in this race, he's a horse that I want to use underneath.
Yeah, I can't take issue with any of that. I just thought, for me, because I have spreads elsewhere, and I do have stronger opinions on the top horses here. I'm narrowing it down, but these big field grass races, luck plays a huge role, and so I can see your approach completely because you may have the best horse often does not win.
Yeah, and Tripp was determinant of the outcome in the last couple of races for both of those Chad Brown horses, so we'll see if it's the case here. Let's move on to the next race in the sequence that I think we can move through a little bit more quickly, the Grade 2 Fairgrounds Oaks. 9 signed on. Sounds like we could lose at least one of them, Marcus. I think you reported on Twitter today that Bless the Broken will be running at Turfway Park instead in the Bourbonnais Oaks. But no matter how many end up running in this race, Good Cheer is going to be a heavy favorite, and she is way the horse to beat. I mean, she hasn't run some standout speed figure yet, but she's just been way more consistent and more visually impressive than just about anybody else on the Oaks Trail right now. And she's facing a field here that she's supposed to be able to beat.
Yeah, she's not the kind of horse to run big figures really until she gets a fast pace. I think with a faster paced race, and she's been staying closer and closer too. She was a pretty handy horse last time, her first race back at age 3. I don't know. I mean, she's just so far the best horse in the race. I think there's going to be a decent pace. She's been at Fairgrounds. She stayed there after she won the last time. She hasn't missed any work. She seems to me to be improving. I don't see her getting beat.
Well, we can go right to your grid for this race, Marcus, and I don't think there's a whole lot to add to it. Good Cheer is the single. No backups for you, and spoiler alert, no backups for me either. I think we took the exact same approach in this race. She's going to be an extremely short price. I mean, we're kind of basically thinking that she is basically turning this into a pick 4 sequence instead of pick 5. And yeah, there would be great value if you were able to beat her and you had that kind of opinion that she was vulnerable for some reason. And I looked long and hard. I just couldn't find anybody else that I could really make the case was going to A, handle the distance, and B, get the trip that was going to give them the advantage over Good Cheer.
Yeah, I mean, the one horse that could fall into that category is Ahava, because we don't know how good she is, and she was quite good first time out, going 3/4 as a sister to the sprinter Vava, stretching out, in her second start, going from maiden to a graded stakes race against a horse who's the Kentucky Oaks favorite. I think it's a lot to ask, although I see her as the horse with the most potential upside. I do not like her to win this race.
Now, as we flip on over to my grid for this race, you can see that I did the same thing. Good Cheer is going to be my single. And I tried to find other horses to use underneath as maybe in the defend category, but I completely agree on Ahava, just a horse that I can't really make the case based on pedigree that she's going to be able to handle this task of stretching out in distance in just the second start of her career. And I also took a long look at Her Laugh, who was a visually impressive winner of the Untappable two-back, but kind of taking stock of those that finished behind her, I don't think a whole lot of the race in retrospect. And yeah, she had an excuse in the Suncoast last time, but once again, that was not the strongest field. And she just feels like a horse that isn't quite in the same league as Good Cheer. And, you know, if I'm going to use other horses or spend more money against Good Cheer, I want to at least, you know, be afraid that the favorite is not going to show up and have some concern that, you know, singling this horse is going to bite me. And I just don't. I mean, if she runs her race, I think she is going to find herself in the winner's circle. So let's move on to the final leg of this sequence, the Grade 2 Louisiana Derby, going the 9.5 furlong distance for the 3-year-olds. And Marcus, when I was putting together a ticket for this race and thinking about, you know, how to, you know, break down these horses into categories, I kept coming back to the idea that this race is really the key to the multi-race sequence ending here, because I feel like a lot of my opinions earlier were just kind of surviving to get to this race, where I feel like there are a lot of things going on, a lot of horses you can make cases for, potentially value to find on certain horses, depending on your opinion. So, definitely a lot to dive into in this Louisiana Derby.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the opposite of the Tom Benson, in that there are, to me, many plausible outcomes, but I have a lot more of positive thoughts about many of the horses rather than just not thinking they're all that good. I do think it's going to be a fast-paced race. I do think there are a lot of horses that are sitting on potential significant improvement. I don't think there is anyone right now who has stood out in any way. John Hancock, I suppose, will be the favorite by default. He hasn't run especially fast. He's got a bad post. Yeah, I mean, I wanted as much coverage as I could get, but unlike in the first race, I did find myself capable of tiering the horses because I have stronger opinions on some than others.
Well, let's get right into those tiers, and we could take a look at your grid for this race, Marcus, because I want to ask you about some things. You know, I see that you've got John Hancock in the A category, or using as one of your key horses. And I was wondering how you arrived there, because, I mean, I'll just say for me, I don't like John Hancock at all in this race. And I think his presence in this race makes it a very bettable race, because I believe like fair odds on him are somewhere in double digits. I don't get this horse at all, especially in this race, stretching out to this distance, being so lightly raced with the pace scenario that you talked about. I mean, you know, we're not going to show Furio as being a horse that we like to win this race on either of our grids, but his presence in here, I think, makes it very difficult for anybody else who has intentions to go to the front end, because that horse has sprint speed and his only chance is to go to the front. So go for it, Marcus.
I had a conversation this morning with Furio's trainer, because he doesn't fit in the race, in my opinion. And I was wondering if he was going to scratch. No, he's not going to scratch. Also, he lugs in all the time, and he doesn't lug in if he has a target. So their plan is to not have him lead. David, I have seen too many races like this at fairgrounds where, especially on big days in stakes races, where I think that there are 4 major pace players and one horse ends up setting a not insane pace and getting clear. And I hinted it earlier when we got started, the track has a speed favoring an inside cast to it. And so, yeah, I'm not a huge John Hancock fan. I will say that I don't think Owen Almighty is that great. He got a really good run in the Tampa Bay Derby, but he did make the most of it. He's got some talent. This horse did fight him off and was going away at the end and galloped out well. The reason I used him is because I think while he hasn't been impressive yet, I think he's the one that's going to be sent. And if he gets clear, he may be a strong galloping type and on the right track. You know, Cox, I'm sure, has this horse ultra fit. He's a wire-to-wire threat to me as much as anybody.
Yeah, I mean, They've got to be aggressive with him from the inside. Even taking into account what you said about Furio, I mean, isn't Yinzer potentially a real foe for this horse, given the way that they've ridden him so aggressively with the blinkers going on the last couple of times, and kind of keeping in mind how Ben Curtis won the Risen Star with magnitude?
Yeah, I know.
You've got to imagine that the same tactics are going to be employed on him.
I know. I think they're going to go forward with him. And I know he set a fast pace last time. I just have a feeling that the other horse is a faster horse. And what we see a lot of times is if the inside horse asserts and the outside jockey sees that the inside horse jockey is not going to back off at all, they'll back off a little bit because, Ben Curtis might want to get to the front, but he also doesn't want to finish 10th by 37 lengths, or maybe he does. I don't know. It's somewhat illogical, and I would rather use illogic on a better price, but I do not want this horse to knock me out in the last leg.
Fair enough. Talk a little bit about the other two horses that you've got in the key category, because they're both interesting.
Yeah, I've been high on Hypnus, and I remain high on him. I wish he would have drawn a little better. That it ended up not being a great race, his maiden, from the subsequent outcomes. But I do think that both Cromwell and Doroteo are better horses than they've shown since then. I think coming into that race, they were both set to run very well, and they did. And this horse, beat them pretty comfortably. It was a sloppy track. Maybe he moved up on the slop. But it was hard for me not to be impressed with the degree of professionalism he showed debuting in a rout. And beyond that, the sustained run he made, because he started getting going past the half-mile pole and crossed the wire still full of run. I mean, I'm sure you saw his trip in the Rebel. I wish he would have been a little closer early. I want to think he has a bit more pace than that. But this horse was moving up and then got completely blocked. He didn't have a chance to run until inside the eighth pole. Once clear, he finished with some good energy, galloped out well. I think he has a nice move forward in him. I'd like, he's been at Fairgrounds all winter. He's coming back here. He's going to be, I think he's going to be the right price. I like him. I like him pretty well here. I believe, who else did I use? Tiz-tastic?
Instant Replay.
Oh yeah, Instant Replay. Yeah. He got a great setup in his allowance win, but he might get a great setup here too. I know they ran the horse for a tag. He took a few starts to break his maiden, but he's on the lead at Oaklawn going a mile, and then last at Fairgrounds going a mile on the 16th. I think they found the way he's best suited to running. I do think he's going to be taken back. I don't think this horse is going to take any money. I don't know that anyone around this table is especially high on him, but he strikes me as the kind of horse who's gotten suddenly quite good, and he's running on his home track and could have a very good setup at a fair price. So there you go. I threw him in there.
Yeah, no, I hear you on the price. I mean, he's 6-1 on the line, and Hypnus is 10-1. I'll be surprised if those prices aren't flip-flopped. I think Instant Replay is not going to be a horse that pulls in the same level of support for all the reasons that you mentioned. I have a little trouble with the 92 buyer here last time, only because I look at the PPs of Furio, one runner above him in the past performances, and I have a little trouble believing he ran a new buyer top by 10 points, going 2 turns for the first time, just given what I think about that horse. But if the number is true, Instant Replay is a contender in here. I did not include him in my grid, and as you can see, I sorted these horses out a little differently than Marcus did. I really like a horse in this race, and that's Chunk of Gold. And this is a very competitive race where I think a lot of people are going to be tempted to spread. And I want that one key horse that I'm hoping I can get alive to at a decent price. I know he was 40+1 last time, and that's the time that you want to have the opinion on these horses when they're huge prices and they get a piece of the pie. I don't care about that because he's not going to be some short price in this race going out for the connections that he does. And I thought he ran extremely well in the Risen Star. That is a race that got a huge buyer speed figure, a huge speed figure, whatever numbers you look at. And we saw in the Virginia Derby last week that maybe that is a true number, because the top 2 finishers, American Promise and Render Judgment, who are both up the track in the Risen Star, came back to significantly improve their speed figures, finishing first and second in that Virginia Derby last week. So there was some evidence already that the Risen Star was a strong race just based on the clock. And Chunk of Gold, he kind of like Hypnus in the Rebel, had some real trouble, and I thought even more so than Hypnus, coming to the top of the stretch of that Risen Star, because he was being asked to really commence a move between horses and just ran right into the back of a horse that was tiring at that point and had to tap on the brakes, lost momentum, and most horses in that situation would just kind of give it up. But he regained his stride, regained the momentum going back down to the rail, and really finished well to make up a good 4 lengths on Built in the final eighth of a mile to get there and nip that rival for second at the end. Chunk of Gold strikes me as the horse that's going to have no trouble with distance. He handled the dirt last time, and I do believe there's going to be pace in this race. So if he is anywhere in the 6-1 to 8-1 range, which I think he's going to be, he's the horse that I really want to lean on here, because in a lot of ways, I think he's the most likely winner. What were your feelings on him and just the Risen Star in general?
Well, I think he'll be higher than 6 or 8-1, actually. I don't think he's going to take much money at all. And we talked about him because we talked about the Risen Star on video, and we both liked the things he did at Turfway in both of his races. And those may have been validated in the Risen Star. It looks like they were. My questions are this. I thought the inside was probably good on that day, and he did rally on the inside. Also, it was just a weirdly run race. The winner set an extremely fast pace and never stopped. And in races like that, I mean, I think of Keeneland, because that looked like a lot of Keeneland races where a front runner, gets loose, goes fast, never comes back. The chasing horses, all like they're trying around the turn into the 3/16th pole and get to the 8th pole, done. They've made their run already. And then some closer will clunk along and pass them and get second. I'm a little concerned that's what happened with Chunk of Gold. Maybe not. I mean, I'm certainly not going to argue against using him. I wouldn't be bold enough to single a horse like that. But I mean, when you have a feeling about a horse in that price range where you think is getting the right setup and is improving and capable of winning, it's a great opinion to hold. I mean, I wish I had as strong an opinion on a single horse. I like Hypnus, but I don't think I like him as much as you like Chunk of Gold.
Yeah, the more I look back at Risen Star Day, the less I feel that there was much of a rail bias. I think speed was more of the key factor than being on the rail. I mean, because if we really think there was a rail bias, we're not supposed to think Hall of Fame's performance was legit in the race before. Most of the horses that rode the rail that were successful were on the lead. We didn't see too many horses making up a lot of ground coming up the rail.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe even I'm thinking the entire meet, because I had just watching races here day in and day out. It just blows my mind how often, there are 4 horses moving at the quarter pole. The 2 on the outside start going backwards by the 8th pole. The 2 off the rail is coming a little forward. And the horse in the rail seems to always, I mean, it just to me, like, I agree. There's not conclusive evidence. I think on the day it started to seem like that and people got carried away. And then I went back over it and I came up more with something like you. So maybe he didn't ride any kind of bias at all. If that race was a legitimate performance and is just another stepping stone to the horse that he could be, the latest in the line of an Ethan West $3,000 preservation at the Star, then he's absolutely can win.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. And speaking about the Risen Star, I just want to mention a couple of other horses that do merit discussion. Built, who, if we think that the rail was the place to be, I'm not necessarily espousing that opinion, but if you do, you're supposed to like Built because he moved outside and tried to make a run at the horse setting the fast-paced magnitude and got turned away. I don't know about you, Marcus. I have reservations about how far Built wants to go, because the way that he shortened stride at the end of some of his route races, I don't love to see. And then you've got Vassimo for Todd Pletcher, who was wide most of the way, seemed like he was about to get pulled up on the far turn, and somehow completed the superfecta, putting blinkers on for this race.
So it's Built.
Yeah, and Built is as well. I mean, maybe those are horses you want to upgrade. I think Vassimo is more suited to the distance than Built is, but I don't like the antics that I saw last time.
Yeah, I mean, that horse is suited to as far a distance as well, twice as far. Just looking at him, he looks like a huge stayer. He doesn't have much brilliance. To me, he's a horse who could improve and run well. I have a little bit of trouble seeing him improve enough to actually win, but he could. Built, I feel like Built is like, even after all these races, I still don't know exactly who he is. I mean, he got away with a slow pace. in December, but then he finished like a lightning fast. He finished extremely well. That was a crazy sloppy track on the comp day. You know, the outside looked at the end of the day like it might have been better, and the winner came down the middle of the track. He was more inside. I didn't like his race very much there. I didn't think they were even going to run last time. I thought they were going to wait for the Louisiana Derby. I will say I did have a long talk with the trainer this morning, and of course trainers are trainers and it's not that they're like misleading people. You have to be confident. If you're going in the race, you know, and you're talking with your owner about going in the race, you're not going to say, well, I don't know if he really fit. He might only want to go no. He's saying what he said to me. Jose Ortiz worked this horse in blinkers the last time. He had worked him without blinkers, and then he had to ride somebody else. They think that he's a totally different horse. He's quirky. He added a shadow roll last time. He jumped shadows, and he's kind of stabbing around, trying to feel his way through things. I'm torn. I'm using him.
Yeah, and before we move away from this race, because we're going to show our grids in a second, the one more horse I want to mention is Caldera, who, if he was not a my racehorse horse, and I felt like he was going to be some fair price, I would have had him as one of my key horses in this race. I'm worried that there's no value with him, but watching his races back, he does feel like a horse that's going to run all day. His maiden win was impressive. And I don't care so much the getaway car didn't come back to run well last weekend. Caldera feels like a horse that is on the upswing. So
I agree with you about that.
I'm using him.
Yeah, I've used him as well. He could be really good. I like a lot of things I've seen from him. His recent work has been good. He's got a ton of substance to him. He's got some speed. He's got some stay. It's in short what you said about the race. It's an interesting race with a lot of potentially really good horses. A really fascinating puzzle to dive into.
Well, Marcus, we're going to wrap it up by you showing your pick 5 grid and just talk us through some strategy, how you're thinking about playing this. Obviously, we've got races 9 and 11, the New Orleans Classic and the Fairgrounds Oaks, where you got a pair of 7, Sierra Leone and Good Cheer, that are going to be leans for a lot of people. So I know we're not doing anything particularly clever there, but sometimes you just have to play the race the way that the sequence is dealt to you. So speak a little bit about how you're putting this together.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those classic in and out things to me. I just don't know how anyone could have a particularly strong opinion about a single horse in the opening leg. And I mean, just for the sake of having fun and enjoying yourself and like getting somewhere, in a race like that, I think you really want to survive. Even if you get like a 6-1 shot or something, please just get through the leg. And then, a lot of people will just single Sierra Leone, and I can totally understand that. I was tempted to do that myself. Just enough reservations, and with Good Cheer later in the sequence as a horse I don't see losing, I wanted to just have a couple other options. To me, I think the 2 Chad Brown horses are a cut above anything else, probably at this distance, at this time in the Muniz. I thought about the race in those terms. The Risen Star, another confusing race like the opening leg of the sequence, but in a different way, with plenty of horses with upside, plenty of plausible winners for me, and a race where I want to have sufficient coverage.
And we can flip on over to my strategy grid for this race and have a pretty similar idea to Marcus of just getting through that Tom Benson the first leg. I'm splitting horses into the key use defend categories a little bit more, but I mean, I want to have coverage to multiples in that race. And while I'm using Way to Be Marie, I'd be way happier to kick off the sequence with the 10 Wild About Hillary or the 13 Champagne Rose at bigger prices. We agree about everything in the New Orleans Classic. I'm going to use a little bit of Komorabino Amoide, the 9 in that leg, but I do want most of my play to go through Sierra Leone, just not all of it. And then, the horses that I slotted into the key and use categories in the Muniz, I think are certainly the most likely winners, and I would hope to get slightly better prices with Redistricting and Brilliant Birdie, the 5 and the 8. But I do want most of my play to go through those horses. Good Cheer's the single, and if I can be right with most of my key and use horses in those first 3 legs, and Good Cheer gets home, I would be happy to just get alive the chunk of gold, because that is the horse that I really like the most in this sequence, and the one that I'm kind of keying my whole wager around. Though I do like other horses in the Louisiana Derby. I mean, we mentioned positive things about Caldera. I could see a world where Vossimo kind of gets his act together with the blinkers and runs his best race at this distance. And I agree with most of what Marcus said about Hypnos. So he's the other horse that I kind of have in the mix there. A really interesting sequence and a lot of really nice horses competing on Saturday at Fairgrounds. So Marcus, I'm looking forward to this card.
I am too, even though I'll be running up and down the stairs from the press box to the track, giving all of our loyal customers the recap content they need and deserve.
We'll all be looking forward to everything you've got to write about this card and, tweet about it on Saturday. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in this week to this Pick 5 strategy discussion. And big thanks to Marcus for taking the time to do this. And also, we'd love to hear from you. If you are putting together your own strategy grid, playing multiple tickets for this sequence, put it in the comments. We'd love to see how you are thinking about playing this Pick 5 sequence at Fairgrounds on Saturday. Everybody, good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.